I should never have made that joke. It was 11:30 at night, my boots were soaked with melted snow, and my brain was too tired to filter my mouth. So when my boss looked at me and said, "Do you want to stay tonight?" I smiled like an idiot and said, "Bold offer, boss. You didn't even buy me dinner first." The silence after that sentence nearly killed me. You know those moments when you instantly wish you could rewind time 10 seconds? Yeah, that was one of them. Because Madison Cole, my boss, the most intimidating woman in our entire warehouse, was standing right in front of me. And she was staring at me, not angry, not amused, just studying me, like she was trying to figure out who I really was. I opened my mouth to apologize, but nothing came out at first. My face felt hot, my chest tight. "Madison, Lucas." The way she said my first name stopped me cold. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sound offended, but something in that quiet tone made my stomach drop. Snow slammed against the loading dock windows behind us. Wind screaming through the metal seams of the building. The whole warehouse sounded like it was being dragged across the sky. Most of the workers had already left. Forklifts were silent. Lights dimmed to night mode. It was just the two of us standing there in the office hallway. Me, an exhausted single dad who had been moving boxes for 10 hours straight. And her, the woman everyone on the floor called the steel wall. Madison folded her arms slowly. "You thought I meant that kind of staying?" she asked. I rubbed the back of my neck. "I'm really sorry. That was stupid. I'm just tired." For a second I thought she might send me home with a write-up. Or worse. Instead, she sighed, and something in her face softened. "Lucas," she said quietly, "why were you about to walk 40 minutes through a snowstorm tonight?" That question caught me off guard, because suddenly, this conversation wasn't about the joke anymore. And the truth? The truth was something I didn't usually tell people, especially not my boss. The drive should have been simple, but it wasn't, because sitting in my boss's car at almost midnight felt strange. Madison's SUV was warm, clean, and smelled faintly like coffee. Snow slid across the windshield while the wipers fought to keep the glass clear. Neither of us talked for the first few minutes. The storm outside sounded like 1,000 tiny pebbles hitting metal. Finally, she said, "So, Lily." Just hearing my daughter's name eased something tight in my chest. "She's 8, I said. 2nd grade. Obsessed with space and drawing dragons." Madison glanced at me for half a second. "Dragons?" "Yeah," I smiled a little. "Fire dragons." "Ice dragons. Apparently there are about 50 different species." A small corner of her mouth lifted. "That sounds serious." "Oh, it is," I said. She explained the whole ecosystem to me last week. For the first time that night, the car didn't feel awkward. Then Madison asked quietly, "How long has it just been the two of you?" The question landed gently, but it still hit something deep. 3 years. She didn't look at me, but I noticed her grip tighten slightly on the steering wheel. "Car accident," I added after a moment. "Drunk driver ran a red light." Madison inhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." "Yeah," I said softly. "Me too." We drove in silence for a bit after that. Snow piled along the sides of the road. The city looked like someone had shaken a giant snow globe over Denver. Then Madison said something unexpected. "You're doing a good job." I frowned slightly. "With Lily?" That surprised me. "You've met her for exactly 0 seconds," I said. "I don't need to," she replied calmly. "You stayed late working even though you were worried about her." She paused. "And you were still going to walk 40 minutes through a snowstorm to get back to her?" I stared out the window. No one had ever said that to me before. Not once. Madison slowed the SUV as we turned onto my street. And that's when we saw it. The entire block was black. No streetlights. No windows glowing. Just darkness. My stomach dropped. "Power's still out," I whispered. Madison parked slowly. Then she looked at the dark building and made a decision I never expected. "Lucas," she said quietly, "go get Lily." I turned to her. "And bring her back here." I blinked. "What?" "You're both coming to my house tonight." The drive should have been simple, but it wasn't, because sitting in my boss's car at almost midnight felt strange. Madison's SUV was warm, clean, and smelled faintly like coffee. Snow slid across the windshield while the wipers fought to keep the glass clear. Neither of us talked for the first few minutes. The storm outside sounded like 1,000 tiny pebbles hitting metal. Finally, she said, "So, Lily." Just hearing my daughter's name eased something tight in my chest. "She's 8, I said. 2nd grade. Obsessed with space and drawing dragons." Madison glanced at me for half a second. "Dragons?" "Yeah," I smiled a little. "Fire dragons." "Ice dragons. Apparently there are about 50 different species." A small corner of her mouth lifted. That sounds serious. Oh, it is, I said. She explained the whole ecosystem to me last week. For the first time that night, the car didn't feel awkward. Then Madison asked quietly, "How long has it just been the two of you?" The question landed gently, but it still hit something deep. 3 years. She didn't look at me, but I noticed her grip tighten slightly on the steering wheel. Car accident, I added after a moment. Drunk driver ran a red light. Madison inhaled slowly. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said softly. Me too. We drove in silence for a bit after that. Snow piled along the sides of the road. The city looked like someone had shaken a giant snow globe over Denver. Then Madison said something unexpected. You're doing a good job. I frowned slightly. With Lily. That surprised me. You've met her for exactly 0 seconds, I said. I don't need to, she replied calmly. You stayed late working even though you were worried about her. She paused. And you were still going to walk 40 minutes through a snowstorm. To get back to her, I stared out the window. No one had ever said that to me before. Not once. Madison slowed the SUV as we turned onto my street. And that's when we saw it. The entire block was black. No streetlights. No windows glowing. Just darkness. My stomach dropped. Power's still out, I whispered. Madison parked slowly. Then she looked at the dark building and made a decision I never expected. Lucas, she said quietly, go get Lily. I turned to her. And bring her back here. I blinked. What? You're both coming to my house tonight. For a second I thought I had misheard her. You're both coming to my house tonight. The words hung in the warm air of the SUV while snow drifted past the windshield. Madison. I shook my head slowly. You don't have to do that. I know. It's late. And we barely even talk outside of work. I know that too. Her answers were calm, almost annoyingly calm, which somehow made this harder. I can't just show up at my boss's house with a kid in a backpack, I said. That's weird. Madison tilted her head slightly. Lucas, she said. What part of your apartment having no heat during a snowstorm? Sounds less weird than that? I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because she had a point. Still, something about crossing that line made my chest tight. You don't even know us, I said quietly. Madison looked back toward the dark building, then at me. And something in her eyes softened. I know enough. The way she said it made me pause. Your daughter is 8, she continued. You've worked every overtime shift this month. You've never been late except the day the bus broke down. She glanced at me again, and you were about to walk through a blizzard to get home to her. Her voice lowered just a little. That tells me most of what I need to know. I didn't have an answer for that. Snow piled along the curb outside. The entire street was silent except for the wind. Finally, she leaned back slightly in her seat. Look, she said, softer now. I have a guest room, heat, blankets, food. She hesitated. And hot chocolate. Despite everything, I let out a small laugh. Madison noticed. There it is, she said. What? The human reaction. I rubbed my face, exhausted. If Lily catches pneumonia tonight, I muttered. She's going to remind me of it for the rest of my life. Madison's lips curved faintly. Kids are like that. Another quiet moment passed. Then I looked up at my dark apartment building, and I made the only decision that mattered. Okay, I said. Madison nodded once. Good. Then she added something that made my heart beat a little faster. Lucas, she said gently. When Lily meets me, maybe don't introduce me as the scary boss. The stairwell in my building was completely dark. My phone flashlight barely reached 2 steps ahead of me, and the air inside felt colder than outside. Lily opened the door before I even knocked. She was wrapped in 2 blankets. Her stuffed fox tucked under one arm, hair sticking out in every direction. Daddy. The relief in her voice hit me harder than the cold. I scooped her into my arms immediately. Hey, Bug, I whispered into her hair. You okay? It's really cold, she said against my shoulder. And the lights won't come back. I know. She pulled back slightly and looked at me. Did you walk home in the storm? Not exactly. Her eyebrows scrunched in that serious way she had when she was thinking hard. Then how did you get here? I hesitated, because the answer still sounded strange even in my own head. My boss drove me. Lily blinked. The scary one? I sighed quietly. Yeah, the scary one. Mrs. Diaz shuffled out of the kitchen then, wrapped in 3 sweaters and holding a candle. Mijo, thank goodness, she said. The power company says maybe hours. I nodded. That's why I came up so fast. I adjusted Lily on my hip. My boss offered to let us stay at her house tonight, just until the heat comes back. Mrs. Diaz studied my face carefully. Then she smiled. Good people exist, she said simply. Lily looked between us. We're going to her house? Just for tonight. Does she have snacks? I couldn't help laughing. I have a strong feeling she does. 5 minutes later, Lily had a backpack. Her inhaler, her favorite pajamas, and the stuffed fox clutched tight in her hands. When we stepped back outside, Madison's SUV was still idling at the curb, headlights glowing through the snow. Madison looked over as we approached, and when she saw the small, sleepy bundle in my arms, something in her expression changed. Her voice softened immediately. "Hi, Lily," she said gently through the open door. "I'm Madison." Lily studied her carefully, then asked the most important question in the world. "Do you really have hot chocolate?" Madison smiled. "A professional level amount." Lily nodded once, satisfied, and climbed into the back seat. I closed the door slowly, then glanced at Madison. "You realize," I said quietly, "you just became my daughter's favorite person." Madison started the car and said something I didn't expect. I'm okay with that. But the way she said it made my chest tighten for reasons I wasn't ready to think about yet. Madison's house looked nothing like the places I was used to. Not huge, not flashy, just calm. A small white house on a quiet street where the snow looked neat instead of chaotic. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows like the house itself was breathing. Lily whispered against my shoulder as we walked up the path. "Dad, this looks like a movie house." Madison unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Welcome to my extremely boring home," she said. It was not boring. Hardwood floors, a soft gray couch, a bookshelf that looked organized instead of collapsing like mine at home, and warmth. Real warmth, the kind that wraps around you the second you step inside. Lily slid down from my arms and slowly turned in a circle. "Whoa." Madison smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." 10 minutes later, we were in the kitchen. Madison stood at the stove stirring a small pot while Lily sat at the table watching like it was the most important event of the year. "What are you making?" Lily asked. "The good kind of hot chocolate," Madison said. "The powder kind?" Madison glanced back. "Absolutely not." Lily gasped dramatically. "Dad, she's serious." I laughed quietly. Watching the two of them felt strange in a way I couldn't explain, because Madison wasn't the steel wall manager from work anymore. She had changed into sweats, her dark hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. She looked softer, more human. 3 mugs appeared on the table, marshmallows floating on top. Lily took one sip and her eyes went wide. "This is the best drink I've ever had." Madison leaned on the counter with a small smile. High praise. For a while we just sat there. Hot chocolate, cookies, Lily explaining her dragon drawings, like she was presenting to a board of investors. And Madison listened. Really listened. At one point Lily asked casually, "Do you live here alone?" I started to interrupt, but Madison answered first. "Yes." Then she added gently, "Most nights it's just me." Something about the way she said that made the room quieter. Lily didn't notice, but I did. And for the first time, I wondered what Madison's life looked like after everyone left the warehouse, because suddenly it didn't feel as simple as I had always assumed. About 20 minutes later, Lily's words started to slow. Her head tipped sideways against my arm, while she tried to finish explaining the difference between fire dragons and ice dragons. And the ice ones live on mountains, but the fire ones. Her sentence faded into a sleepy mumble. Madison noticed first. "I think our dragon expert is running out of fuel," she said softly. Lily blinked slowly. "I'm not tired." "You're absolutely tired," I said. Madison stood and grabbed an extra blanket from the hall closet. "Guest room's upstairs," she said. "First door on the right." I carried Lily up the stairs while Madison walked behind us quietly. The house felt even calmer up there, like the storm outside couldn't reach it. The guest room was warm and simple. Soft light, a thick comforter. Lily barely stayed awake long enough to crawl under the blankets. "Dad?" she murmured. "Yeah, Bug. Your boss is nice." I glanced toward Madison, who was smoothing the blanket over Lily's legs. "Yeah," I said quietly. "She is." Lily yawned, then added something that made Madison freeze for a second. "You should marry her." Madison coughed softly. I nearly dropped the lamp. "Lily," I whispered, horrified. But Lily was already half asleep. "I'm just saying," she mumbled into the pillow. "Good night." Within seconds, she was out. Madison and I stood there in silence. The only sound was Lily's slow breathing. Finally, Madison whispered, amused but slightly embarrassed. "Kids are brutally honest." "I'm so sorry," I muttered. "She doesn't filter anything after 9 p.m. Madison shook her head with a quiet laugh. "It's okay." We stepped out of the room and pulled the door halfway closed. Downstairs, the house felt even quieter now. The storm outside had softened, just slow snow drifting past the kitchen window. Madison rinsed the mugs in the sink while I leaned against the doorway. Suddenly aware of how alone we were, the moment felt different, quieter, more personal. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Madison." She looked up. "About that joke earlier, I really am sorry." She studied me for a moment, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "Do you know what I heard in that joke? That I'm an idiot?" A small smile appeared. "Besides that." She stepped a little closer. "I heard someone who isn't used to being taken care of." Her voice softened. "And someone who doesn't quite know what to do when someone tries." My chest tightened, because the worst part? She wasn't wrong. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The kitchen light above the sink hummed softly. Snow drifted past the window in slow, quiet flakes. Madison was standing only a few feet away now, close enough that I could see how tired she really was. The sharp, confident manager from the warehouse wasn't here anymore. This was just Madison, and she was watching me carefully. "I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable," she said after a second. "You didn't," I replied quickly. But that wasn't entirely true. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was something worse. It was honest, and honesty had a way of digging into places I usually kept locked up. "I'm just not used to people helping me," I admitted quietly. Madison crossed her arms loosely. "Why not?" I let out a small breath. "Because when my wife died, everything kind of fell on me at once." The words came slower than I expected. Bills, work, Lily, school meetings, doctor visits. I shrugged. "You get used to carrying things yourself." Madison listened without interrupting. That was something I was starting to notice about her. She didn't rush people. Finally, she said softly, "That sounds exhausting." "It is," I said with a tired laugh. "But you don't really get a choice." Her gaze softened. "You do sometimes." I shook my head. "Not when you're a parent." Madison was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that hit harder than anything else that night. "Lucas, who takes care of you?" The question landed in the center of my chest like a weight. No one had ever asked me that before. Not family, not co-workers, not even friends, because the answer was simple. No one. The word came out before I could stop it. Madison looked down at the counter for a second. Then she stepped a little closer. "Not touching. Just closer. You deserve that too," she said quietly. "Someone taking care of you sometimes." My throat tightened. I didn't know how to respond to that, because part of me wanted to believe her, and another part of me didn't trust it. Maybe she noticed the conflict in my face, because a moment later she said the same question again, the one that had started all of this. "Lucas." Her voice was softer now. "Do you want to stay tonight?" But this time it didn't sound like a practical offer. It sounded like something deeper, like she was asking whether I trusted her. And suddenly, that felt like the hardest question I had faced in years. For a long moment I couldn't answer her. The question wasn't complicated, but the meaning behind it was. Madison wasn't asking about the couch anymore. She was asking if I trusted her, if I was willing to stop pretending I could handle everything alone. And that scared me more than walking through a snowstorm ever had. I rubbed the back of my neck, staring at the kitchen floor. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. Madison tilted her head slightly. "Do what?" "Be responsible for me." Her expression shifted. "That's not what this is." "It kind of is," I said. "You're my boss. You already gave me a ride. You opened your house to my kid. That's more than enough." Madison studied me for a long second. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "Lucas, do you think I do this for everyone?" I looked up. "No." "You're right," she said. The honesty in her voice made my chest tighten. "I don't." She stepped closer, leaning lightly against the edge of the counter. "At work I help people when it's my job," she continued. "But tonight?" Her eyes met mine. That was a choice. The room felt smaller suddenly. "Why?" I asked before I could stop myself. Madison looked toward the stairs for a moment, toward the guest room where Lily was sleeping, then back at me. "Because when I saw you standing in that hallway," she said quietly, "you looked like someone who had been carrying the world on his back for a very long time." My throat went dry, and I recognized it. Something in her voice changed then, not sadness exactly, something older. 12 years ago, she continued slowly. I was the one standing in a storm. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Madison exhaled softly. "My mom got sick when I was 23, cancer." She looked down at her hands. "My dad worked 2 jobs. My sister moved across the country." Her voice lowered. "So it was just me." The words landed heavily between us. I learned how to survive back then, she said. How to keep everything together. Then her eyes lifted to mine again. But the truth is, her voice softened. I wish someone had opened a door for me the way I did for you tonight. Something shifted in my chest when she said that, because suddenly this night didn't feel like charity anymore. It felt like two people who understood the same kind of loneliness. Madison straightened slightly. So, she said gently, I'm asking again. Do you want to stay tonight? And this time, I knew the real answer. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Not at the manager everyone at work was afraid of. Not at the confident woman who ran an entire warehouse without raising her voice. Just Madison, standing in her quiet kitchen at 1 a.m, tired, honest, waiting. Yes, I said finally. The word came out softer than I expected. I want to stay. Something in her shoulders loosened. Not dramatically. Just enough that I could see the tension leave her body. Good, she said quietly. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Madison walked past me toward the living room lamp and switched it off. Leaving only the dim light above the stove, the house fell into a peaceful kind of silence. Couch pulls out, she said gently. Blankets are in the hall closet. I nodded. Thank you. For everything. She paused halfway up the stairs and looked back at me. Lucas, she said. Tonight wasn't charity. I know, I replied. And for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. A few minutes later, I was lying on the pull-out couch under a heavy blanket. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater and the soft wind outside. Upstairs, Lily slept warm and safe, and Madison was somewhere above me in the dark hallway. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was carrying everything alone. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of Lily laughing. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then Madison's voice drifted from the kitchen, and that, she was saying, is why 10 cups of coffee before a meeting is a terrible idea. Lily giggled. I walked into the kitchen and stopped. The two of them were sitting at the table like they'd known each other forever. Sunlight filled the room. Snow glittered outside the window. Madison looked up when she saw me. Morning, she said. Something about the way she said it felt different, warmer, like this wasn't just a storm shelter anymore. And the truth? That one night never really ended. Because weeks later, standing in the warehouse parking lot after another long shift, Madison took my hand and said something that changed everything. Lucas, she said quietly, what if we stop pretending this is just a coincidence? I smiled, because I had been waiting for that question, and the answer was easy. Yeah, I said. Let's stop pretending. Sometimes people think love starts with fireworks, but ours, it started with a snowstorm, a bad joke, and a woman who opened her door when the world outside was freezing.